What is going on, everybody? I'm excited today to introduce to you the next project we're doing on this car. Here it is. This is a complete sub-assembly from an S550 Mustang, specifically out of a 2015 GT, I believe. That whole sub-assembly is going to get swapped into this thing. What it's going to take, I have no idea. No idea how many series of videos this swap will be, but should be interesting. Alright, so I got this off of eBay. I got a differential with 355s, which is cool because this car still has the bone stock, the way Ford put it together, 327 rear end. So I guess I should go over kind of my thoughts on why I'm doing this, some advantages, possible disadvantages. Advantages. Just hit on the gears. I'm basically getting a free gear upgrade. 355s will be nice because with the MT82 transmission in here, fifth gear is my 1-to-1, and I did one of those calculator gear ratio calculators and speed, and with the tires I plan to run and all that stuff, 355s I should be in my 1-to-1 gear around 6,300 RPM, around the maximum speed I should kind of see, so it should all work out. That'll keep me from having to use the overdrive gear, which RPMs drop off, and I don't think that would be too advantageous. So advantage number one. Advantage number two, obviously I can now put camber in the rear, end toe, and kind of do all sorts of alignment stuff. That'll be nice. If you saw my video on Lime Rock, I think I kind of hit that cliff. Now it was an old tire, but again, with a solid rear axle running zero camber, plus the loading on it, you actually get negative camber going around turns, which kind of, obviously isn't good at all. And then, like, real quick, so here's the outside of my tire. Look how far down the scrub radius comes, from the actual top surface area of the tire. So, should kind of help me get a lot more rear grip. Right out of the factory, wider rear track width. That's another positive for sure. Weight is one of those things. I'm going to weigh everything that goes on and comes off to kind of get an idea. I have the Maximum Motorsports, like torque arm, panhard bar, all that stuff. They make some really nice, really stout stuff for sure. Maximum came on board right here. Back when I did the EcoBoost swap, I think that was 2016, and pretty much have their full catalog on this car. Their stuff is absolutely awesome, but that beefiness that you need to add to get a solid rear axle to work might almost about break even with this whole setup. So we'll kind of see what happens there. Weight can go either way. If it's heavier, my car's light in the rear anyways, wouldn't be the worst. I rolled across scales at 2970 with me in the car. The way ST2 rules are, if you're 3,000 pounds, you get an extra 0.1 on your horsepower to weight ratio. So if I end up picking up 15, 20 pounds, well, 30 pounds, I'll be right at 3,000 pounds even. I can actually, then legally make a little more horsepower. If it's lighter, hey, lighter's always good. So that one's kind of a wash, I feel. Let's see. I also want to do it just because I know of two people, there might be a few more, who are trying to swap this into Fox bodies or older Mustang chassis, but nobody has completed it or raced it yet. My goal right now is to have it ready for the Watkins Glen race in, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. So I know it's going to be tough. It'll be a stretch. So yeah, I think that kind of goes over all the benefits. Any tricky bits? I think the rear brakes. Now, I guess this is kind of a benefit, but it could be maybe not a benefit. I gotta measure the piston on these rear calipers. my car could use more rear brake, more rear braking. I do have a proportioning valve in it, and it's full open to the rear, and I could use more in the rear. So I think with the bigger rotors, bigger calipers, I'll have to do the math on the piston size to see how much more of a percentage gain we'll get in the rear. But if it's too much, I can always close up that proportioning valve. So I think that should not be too much of an issue either. I'm obviously going to swap any of the bushings, the rubber bushings in any of the arms. Got to get an adjustable camber arm toe link down there. I forget what this one is called right here, but anyways, going to kind of do, solid bushings all around, or spherical ball joints. But yeah, I think that's it. What I'm going to do today is kind of take off any of the extra stuff, take the shocks off because they're not being used, take the parking brake cables off, shocks, what else? Oh, ABS sensors obviously will not be used. So yeah, kind of strip that down to what is going to be needed. Take a whole bunch of measurements on my car. As far as I still have the ride height marks. Actually this one, because my tire blew out, you can see when the tire blew, the rubber like ripped off some of this stuff. But yeah, take a bunch of like wheelbase measurements, anything I might need, so when I put that rear in it, I can kind of get it, square to the chassis, where it needs to be. If I have to shove the whole thing rearward a tiny bit, that might be advantageous. So yeah, we'll kind of see what we run into. I know this little opening scene's been a little bit long, but I'm kind of just introing this whole thing and my thought process behind it. If you have any comments on it, please leave it below. I kind of teased this project on our Facebook and our Instagram. A bunch of people think it's pretty cool. A bunch of people also think it's the dumbest thing ever. I could care less. I'm doing it. So, hopefully, what I come across, you guys can learn something, or at least be entertained a little bit. But yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of knock out pulling off the cables, take all the measurements I need on the car, and yeah, we should be pretty good. Alright guys, so we're going to draw a solid axle real quick. Well, let's just do, so there's your pumpkin where the gears are. Here's your axles coming out with your brake rotor, or axle tube we'll call it. So let's draw, so let's say this is your tire, right? And then in here you have the hub, and your axle shaft runs down the center to the gears and everything that's in here. So a solid rear axle, there's obviously no easy way to adjust camber or toe or anything. One of the old school methods is with like a torch, heating up the tube and cooling it, and it'll actually shrink the top of the tube, giving you a little bit of camber. But then you got to worry about the splines where they go in and everything. You can get about a ½ degree that way. But the other thing you got to realize is when you're racing, and let's say we're going around a right-hand turn, the front of the car is that direction. Going around a right-hand turn, the tire will actually kind of like roll over, sort of like this, from the grip pushing the tire this way. And kind of like I showed you a little bit ago, how the scrub radius on my tire comes around so far. But you also got to realize that when this gets forced this way, this axle shaft will actually kind of, I hope this kind of shows up on camera, but it'll actually curve or bow a little bit just from the forces applied. And I was talking to a good friend of mine, Al Watson. He's the guy who owns Race Louvers. He actually figured out that there's a little vent breather tube on the Ford 8.8 rear axle that dips down and into the I guess the axle shaft area just to vent, you know, heat and any pressure that might build up. When he took one of his rear ends apart, he noticed that this little vent tube on the inside was ground away, and was able to do some math, kind of triangulating from here to where it was ground away to center, to figure out that it was something like 3/4 of a degree negative camber from just the forces acting on his car. And that was just a regular American Iron car, not something with, you know, all the downforce and everything I have, not even on Hoosiers either, you know. So again, that's kind of another reason why I kind of got to get some camber in the rear. Simple as that. So we got the car up on our blocks and started taking some measurements, and so far everything's looking pretty good, close enough. Sway bar will not be able to transfer over. I was kind of hoping that would. The maximum one is much too skinny, but adding a, you know, an aftermarket adjustable sway bar isn't, I don't think, a huge hurdle. Or if I can keep these you know, frame extensions and the factory one, I could just use a sway bar made for an S550 Mustang. But those rear extensions might interfere with the stock fuel tank. I want to try and do this without having to go the fuel cell route, because then that's gonna kind of up the cost and everything. But if I have to do a fuel cell, maybe I could do something, I don't know, something a little more advantageous with it. Maybe put it like where the back seat is or something. Keep that weight between the axles. But shock mounts was another one. So the OEM shock mounts are those two holes there and down there. So it was easy enough to measure the width on my car, and I think it was, what was it, 44 inches. These ones are 48 inches. I use this thing, this is going back to my bodywork days, called a Tram Bar. So what you do is, since I can't get down in there and measure a straight point to point, you just put that point there. This point will fit right in the hole down there. Then you just take it out and measure your points. So yeah, I'll be using that Tram Bar to kind of see what will fit where. Other good measurements. Oh yeah, so the shock mounts will be about 2 inches further out on each side, so they might sit in the car at a little bit of an angle. I know that'll play with, I forget the exact term, but anytime a shock and spring is at an angle, it works differently than if it's like straight up and down. I gotta look into that a little bit. I could always make some sort of bracket that maybe comes inboard a little bit, but again, now you're dealing with different leverage ratios where the control arm pivots. So let's see, what else so from axle center line to the back of the frame right here, I need about 8 inches, and from this car's axle center line to the fuel tank is like 8.5. So it'll kind of fit there, but I won't be able to do any sort of setback if I don't want to touch the fuel tank. So yeah, so that's about all I measured so far. Stuff is close enough. I still don't see any reason why this shouldn't work. So I think what I'm going to do now, I think I'm going to start pulling the rear out of the car. Yeah, because I got to get that out of the way, obviously, to kind of really just get this underneath, shoved up, and kind of try to lift it into place. Alright guys, I've been doing a bunch more measuring. Finally got the wheels off to get in there a little bit better, and I'm pretty excited. I just reread the ST2 rules along with the American Iron rules. This swap, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I want to do it and remain legal for ST2. I would like to do it, if this IRS was legal in American Iron, be legal in American Iron as well. American Iron, you're allowed to use the, the 99 to 04 Cobra IRS, but you're not allowed to use one of these newer IRSs. So I'm going to put in an RCR for that, even though I'm not running American Iron. These IRSs are so much more plentiful. Plus the way American Iron's been going, they've kind of been catering some of the rules around the S550 Mustang. So anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But ST2, the way the rules are written, I'm taking a bunch of measurements and I'm pretty sure I can get this thing under my car without breaking any of the rules as far as like what you're allowed to like notch or not notch. So where was I at? Oh yeah, so anyways, at this point right here, so I measured the width of them across it, and they will actually land real close to this little thing right here, which is the original spring perch on this car. If we go, what is it, forward of the axle center line, we'll call it, I don't know, 10 inches, I guess. And if we go about 10 inches in front of the axle center line, it puts us, I don't know, maybe a few inches in front of it. So right where the end of the tape measure is around about where that will be in a vertical plane. This cardboard right here, I cut out this cardboard to fit the curve of that right there down to that mounting point. And if we end up putting this here, it's a little hard to see up and in there. It's like we got plenty of room to make all this work, I feel. And then the last measurement, now this isn't quite where it needs to go, but from the ground to like where this top mount would be, I'm gonna have to find somebody with one of these cars that's lowered, or if you have one, if you can give me some measurements, that'd be, you know, very helpful. But from the ground to, you know, the top of that mounting point is we'll call it 11. And then if we come out here, because the rear of the car is in the air, that 28 is now, we'll call it 39. So we know the rear of the car came up 11 inches. The top mount right there is 11 inches. So we need to be 22 inches off the ground, which if you look at where the cardboard's sitting, it's kind of right about where it is. And if you remember, we need to be a little bit in front of this original spring perch. So like that top mount will be like where my fingertip is in space. So yeah, I'm kind of like taking all these measurements. I kind of want to do them all before I just yank everything out and realize it's like not even close, or you know, the way the rules are written, there's certain things you can or can't really like modify. But yeah, I don't need to modify the OEM frame rail, don't need to modify the OEM subframe. There is a rule that says updating or backdating of OEM subframes is legal regardless of year, so I'm good there. So yeah, I can't really see a reason why this wouldn't work and would have to do anything in the gray area to make it all happen. So yeah, I'm excited right now. I think I'm gonna unbolt this rear and kind of, once I unbolt it, roll that one underneath and kind of see how far or close I really am. And then last measurement is this rear mount point. If we take another measurement, we're about 10 inches from axle center line. And if we go up and down, call it about 16. And if you remember, the car is up 11 inches right now. So the 16 plus the 11, it's up, what's that, 27? So if we go 10 inches back from the axle center line, puts us, a little bit hard to point, but right around where these two holes are. I measured the width, and we're actually going to land pretty much right on this frame rail. And if you look, there's actually like almost like a big threaded hole right here and here. But the height of where that's supposed to be, 27 inches. And if we look from over here, it's a little bit hard with the angle, but you know, we might have to run like a 1-inch spacer from the subframe to the chassis. I'm wondering if this chassis, since it was designed around a solid axle, the whole axle moved up and down, so the rear frame or like rear OEM rails and floor and all that stuff is just higher than it is in an S550 Mustang. So this whole subframe assembly doesn't need to be like tucked way up in the body. It actually hangs below it a little bit is my initial assessment, I guess I'll call it. So yeah, it's looking like I might need to take advantage of the fuel cell rule. If you remove the fuel cell, you know, I can obviously just get something like a little bit like skinnier or taller. When you go to a fuel cell, you know, you can kind of move it forward or backwards, around, whatever you need to. I'll see if there's a rule. American Iron has a rule where it has to be behind the rear axle. ST2, I didn't see any rules. If that's the case, what I might do is put a fuel cell like in the rear passenger seat area, because the right rear on my car is always the light corner. As long as I can do something that's like big enough, because under that floor, remember, now the exhaust is on the sides. I don't have any, like, there's tons of space under there. Cut the floor to drop a fuel cell in there. That'd be pretty cool. So yeah, I think I'm gonna start unbolting this thing. Alright guys, big moment here. As you can see, old rear is out, gas tank's out. Any of the other, there's like the Panhard bar, torque arm is sitting way up there. But anyway, so the new sub-assembly is about to go in. So much room for activities back here now. So yeah, this is the very first time I'm trying to slide this sub-assembly under the car. Alright guys, so here we are, kind of first attempt. I knew I was going to have contact right here with the rear, you know, spare tire well, whatever you want to call it. You can see this little piece right here is actually an aftermarket piece for the maximum adjustable sway bar, so that can come off no problem. Once that comes off, you can see how much higher we can go and shouldn't really have any interference with anything. And if you remember right from our earlier measurements, this mounting point right here needs to be roughly about here. So we got to come up, what's that, 5 inches maybe? So we're actually looking pretty good in the front. And then, let's see, I took a picture of it. So yeah, modifying the floor pan down there is legal in the ST2 rules as of right now. Let's see, section 6.2.1, subsection 6B, removal of the floor section or the rear hatch trunk space and either replacement with a sheet metal cover or placement of a fuel cell is permitted without an additional modification factor. So chopping out that little bit of floor is legal. And I honestly think that's about all I'm going to have to do to get this thing up high enough where I need to. I've been going at it for a while today, so I'm going to kind of take a break personally right now. Next scene, I guess tomorrow, I'm going to kind of cut out this little bit of floor section and, you know, kind of get this thing in its final resting place. Alright guys, so there it is. As you can see, we're pretty close to where we're going to end up. Not quite. I think it's a little bit to the left still. We got to slide it over. But taking advantage of that rule I just read, took care of that. I chopped off the old sway bar bracket right there. You can see we have a little bit of room to play with before we have some interference right there. It's definitely getting tight, but I mean, believe it or not, we're almost like pretty darn close to where I want to be. I'm going to have to get a few measurements from a factory S550 Mustang on the exact height of this mounting point, or maybe from like the control arm to the ground. I pretty much just need like a few measurements from a factory one just to double check, you know, but otherwise it's like I knew it would be tight, but we're kind of there. So yeah, like I just said, we're pretty much there. I think that's where I'm going to wrap up this video. This video was just going to be kind of like an intro to, you know, getting everything off this project. We kind of got roughly mocked up. So please hit that subscribe button. Part 2 will be coming out soon enough. As always, guys, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.